talking about something really great. Palm Sunday.
Yeah, that's the Sunday that we paint our palms purple to commemorate King Saul talking to that palm reader lady, and then we wave him in the air.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, yes, it is. What Bible do you read? Palm Sunday commemorates the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. Now picture this. Jesus rode in on a donkey while the crowds put their cloaks and palm branches all over the ground, shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David."
That's what I said. That's what I meant.
Okay, now picture this. Jesus' popularity was going viral. I mean, he just raised Lazarus from the dead in the same community just a few days earlier.
Wait, post-dead Lazarus was maybe at the very first Palm Sunday?
Yeah, probably.
That's so cool. I bet if he was there, he was probably like,
"And you're a thriller, Jesus. You raised me from the dead when you said, get up, Now, to complete all of this, Jesus needed a donkey. Now, you'd think that a king or a prince would ride in on a horse, but not Jesus. He knew the message that he wanted to send. You see, a donkey represents peace. Anybody riding a donkey represented peaceful intentions.
yeah, it says right here in Matthew 21, it says that Jesus sent 2 of his disciples to get him a donkey. Hey, I wonder which 2 he sent.
Maybe Thomas.
I doubt it. I bet he sent Andrew. Andrew would totally do that. And probably Tony. I bet he sent Andrew and Tony.
Tony's not a disciple.
Oh, sorry. Tony is.
Still not a disciple. What translation of the Bible do you read? Jesus needed a donkey, so he asked 2 disciples to go get him a donkey. He told them they would find one in town, tied there next to a colt.
Yeah. And then he said, untie them and bring them to me. And if somebody asks you about it, you tell them the Lord feeds them.
Yeah, what?
Well, Jesus told his disciples to go steal a donkey for him.
What Bible do you read? It doesn't say that at all.
Like, I can't figure this out. I mean, Jesus, he changed water into wine. Cool. He fed the 4,000.
He fed the 5,000.
What?
He fed the 5,000.
Doesn't matter.
It does matter, not the 4th. It's the 5,000.
We're splitting hairs. Jesus fed a large group of people, and that's cool. He healed people with leprosy. He raises Lazarus from the dead, and then boom, he's like, hey guys, go steal me a donkey. I'm just saying, I don't think that's very WWJD.
The significance of Jesus riding in on a donkey, which he did not steal, was to fulfill the prophecy that is found in Zechariah 9:9.
Yeah, but...
And the king, riding in on a lowly donkey with his way paved with palm branches, the palm branches symbolize triumph or victory.
What?
The palm branches.
The bread?
Palm branches, Palm Sunday.
I thought it was the palm, and they should call it Branch Sunday, because that's confusing. We all have palms with us all the time. I thought... I'm sorry, Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday is a time for us to prepare our hearts for the agony of his passion and the joy of his resurrection. So this week, let's cover the road to the cross with our hearts, our souls, and our minds as we reflect on the final week of Jesus' life.
Let's celebrate in anticipation the return of the King of Kings.
So today is Palm Sunday, and it's the day we start looking over to Jesus and his suffering. And so we look into his dying and his resurrection, and we celebrate him coming in to town, into Jerusalem. And our gentle king rides victoriously. He rides victoriously towards his death. And as his followers, we're called to do the same thing, to ride victoriously to his death, to follow him, to pick up our crosses, to deny ourselves, and to follow him. And so each month we've been looking at one of the 12 disciples to see what the disciples will teach us and what lessons we can learn from them. And so this month we're going to continue that. And we're going to start with a little joke. There was a man in the church, and he was having some marital problems. So he goes to the pastor, and he says, I want some. I've been having dreams of ambitions, and I've been having dreams of being passionate for my marriage, and I want to do something about that. And so he hands him a book. And he says, it's a book called Man of the House. I want you to read this and then come back. And so he goes and he reads it, and finally when he's done reading it, he pulls into his house, and he goes in and he sees his wife, and he goes in and he says, from now on, woman, I want you to know that I'm the man of the house, and my word is law. What I say goes. And tonight you're going to fix me a gourmet meal, and afterwards you're going to make me a sumptuous dessert, and then after dinner you're going to draw me a bath, and I'm going to relax, and then when I'm finished my bath, guess who's going to dress me and put on my robe and comb my hair? And the wife looks at him and says, the funeral director. That guy is ambitious and he's passionate, but he misdirected, a little misdirected. And these characteristics can be good. And so we're going to look at those same characteristics in James of Zebedee. James, the brother of John. And his story starts off like this. A little farther up the shore, Jesus saw Zebedee's sons, James and John, in a boat repairing their nets. He called them at once, and they also followed him, leaving their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men. So a few things about James. James is the oldest brother. He's the oldest brother between he and John. And this gives him some privileges in the family. He will be the one who's going to take over the family business. He's going to be one who's going to get a larger share of the inheritance. He's coming from a reasonably wealthy and successful family. You see, he's got hired men in the boat. Now, you don't hire men to help you in your business unless you've got a successful fishing business, right? And so he's become accustomed to a sense of privilege, somewhat privilege. He's a successful, rough fisherman, but a successful businessman. And this is true before he becomes a follower of Jesus, and it's true afterwards as well, this sense of privilege that he has. And you see it that he becomes a part of the inner circle of Jesus. He's used to having some connections. You see in John that John and his family knows the high priest. He's what gets he and Peter into the courtyard when Jesus is on trial because they have these connections. They get to see the glory of God rest on Jesus during the Transfiguration. They're the only ones to witness him resurrect Jairus' daughter. So James is used to being in the in crowd. He's used to having this privilege. Jesus will give he and his brother the names the sons of thunder. We remember the sons of thunder, the sons of rage. They had thunderous personalities. And James did. He has a thunderous, passionate personality. And so we're going to look at a couple episodes with James and John. They're familiar episodes, ones that we should know fairly well. In Luke 9, you get this incident here where Jesus is heading towards Jerusalem. He's heading towards, he's not made the triumphal entry yet that we celebrate on Palm Sunday, but he's headed that way, and he goes through a Samaritan village. And he sends messengers to the Samaritan village, but the people don't welcome Jesus. They don't want Jesus there. And so when James and John, when they see this, they say to him, Lord, should we call down fire from heaven? We're going to bring fire down from heaven on them? But Jesus rebukes them, and then they head on their way. Now you see here, James is willing to burn up these idolatrous, mixed blood heathens. The sons of thunder, ready to call down the lightning. Boom! Just incinerate them, right? You just want to incinerate them. Now, this is passion. This is courageous passion for God, for Jesus. Notice why this happens, because they insult Jesus. We don't want you here. Get out. They're insulting his master. They're insulting his teacher. And his passion is something a lot of times that we lack. He's outspoken. He's intense, and he's impatient with evil, and he's impatient with insulting his master. And so these things, if they're left unchecked, they can be deadly. I mean, he wanted to incinerate them, right? If they're left unchecked, there can be some deadly consequences. But if they're harnessed appropriately, they can be great, great leaders. They can produce great leaders for the church. We see these connections in people like Nehemiah, who had courageous passion to go and build the new wall, and people like John the Baptist, who stood up to the leaders of his time. We see it in Elijah, the prophet Elijah. You read the story of Elijah and how he stood up to the kings of his time. And this connection to James and Elijah is what I'll look at a little bit more. I left this little footnote here on purpose. You see this little A is a footnote that you might find in some of your Bibles. And then there's a footnote because some of the manuscripts include the phrase right there, as Elijah did. As Elijah did. You want me to burn these people down like Elijah did? And James is thinking he's following in the footsteps of this great prophet Elijah. Jesus uses this incident to teach them about love and to teach them about service, to turn this around to his way. But James thought he has a legitimate reason for his response here, for his passionate response. Let's look at this a little bit. Remember, they're in Samaria. They're in the village in Samaria. This is an area that had been populated by people who had been bred with the Assyrians. This is why the Jews and Samaritans didn't alone. They were mixed blood. They had mingled and intermarried with the Samaritans, with the Assyrians for many years. They had kind of a mixed religion going on. And so this is part of the issue. But before the Assyrians come into the picture, before the Assyrians conquer Israel, Samaria was the home of the northern Israel king. It was where the palace of the king resided, and it was the central part of the Baal worship culture. All right? So Samaria was the location of where Ahab, King Ahab, one of the most evil of all, brings in the Baal worship. And his son, Ahaziah, would have an incident in 2 Kings where he falls through some lattice work, and he seriously injures himself. All right, so we're going to look briefly at this little episode where he falls and injures himself, kind of looking at the background behind what's going on with James and Jesus in Samaria. So he falls through the lattice work. King Ahaziah falls through the lattice work. And then he sends messengers. And he says, go to the temple of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, to ask whether he's going to recover. Am I going to get better? The angel of the Lord sends Elijah out and says, go and tell the messengers this. Go intercept them. And tell them, is there no God in Israel? Why are we going to Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, to ask whether the king's going to recover? So the king's sending somebody, this god Baal-zebub, to somebody from Baal-zebub. First of all, going to a fortune teller, a soothsayer for the Israelites is forbidden. We don't do that. But going to this guy, this Baal-zebub, is even worse. Baal-zebub is the god of the Philistines. He's the lord of the flies. He's the god of all the things that swarm around filth and decay and breed maggots. And he's nasty, okay? This is the guy that he's going to. The Jews would change this guy, Baal-zebub's name, to Beelzebul. Beelzebul, which in their language meant god of dung. This is how much they revolted this god, okay? Eventually that would become Beelzebub in Jesus' day to represent Satan. So this guy is not the God you want to go to at all. But this is who Ahaziah sends messengers to. Well, Elijah will intercept them, and he'll send the message back, and the king doesn't like the message. And so he says, go arrest Elijah. And he'll send a company of 50 men to Elijah. And they'll come, and they'll say, come, you're coming with us. And in the process, they're insulting the God of heaven. And Elijah, boom, incinerates the company of 50 men. So Ahaziah sends another company of 50 men, same thing. Boom, incinerates the men. So he sends a third company of men. And the third company, the leader humbles himself. He says, please don't kill my men. I'm pleading for their lives. And Elijah spares them, and he goes to Ahaziah with the message that you're going to die right here in your bed, which eventually he does. Now, well, all that story to say that we fast forward back to James and to Jesus in Samaria. James knew this story well. He would have known the story of what happened way back when in Samaria with Elijah and those guys. And Elijah's not condemned. In fact, the circumstances dictate that he was right in what he did. So he's thinking, I stand on solid ground here. They're insulting the master. They're being inhospitable to my teacher, so let's call down thunder on them. But the situations are different. He had passion, he had courage, but the motivation was wrong. The reasons were wrong. He didn't get the mission. He didn't see the bigger picture that Jesus saw. Later on, in the book of Acts, Philip will save many Samaritans. He'll bring the message of Jesus to Samaria, and many of them will become believers in Jesus. You had to James and John's way, you incinerate them all now, and it's over with. He didn't see that bigger picture, but he had the passion. He had the courage behind his master. And we should too. We're granted that courage and that passion by God. Proverbs tells us, the wicked man flees though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. There's a legend in India about a guy who, a magician who turned a mouse into a cat. He was afraid of cats, of course, and he got turned into a cat. And so he was fine for a while, and then the cat came across a dog. He said, I'm afraid of the dog, so I need you to turn me into a dog. So the magician turns him into a dog. And he was fine. He'd been turned into the thing that he was scared of, and then he came across a lion. He says, I'm scared. I need to be a lion. So the magician turned him into a lion. Well, the lion was great. It was good. And then he came across a hunter. And he was scared. He said, I need to be transformed into a hunter. And the magician, with one last bit of magic, turns him back into a mouse. He says, what have you done? And he said, well, I've made you a mouse again. For though you had the body of a lion, you had the heart of a mouse. You let fear rule him. Now, are we wicked or righteous? I declare that we're righteous. God has declared us righteous through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And if we're righteous, then are we passionately courageous? Do we have hearts of mice or do we have hearts of lions? Because we have nothing to fear in this world. Jesus has come to save us. He has come to serve us. And yet, we don't have the ounce of the passionate courage that James displays here in this incident. When he's ready to do whatever it takes for his Lord. Even though misdirected, he's got the passion and the courage behind it. Now let's look at another familiar incident with James. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons and kneeling down asked a favor. What is it you want, he says. Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit on your right and one sit on your left. Now remember who James is. We're going to read the rest of you. We're going to read Jesus' response. James is connected. He's privileged. Remember, he comes from a successful fishing family. This is just something maybe he's used to. We don't know, did they put mom up to this? Is mom going going on her own will for her sons? But I'm thinking that this could be embarrassing for James and John if mom just takes it upon herself to do this. I mean, this is like when you're in elementary school, right? And mama spits on her hand and puts the hair down in front of all your friends, or she gives you a big kiss on the cheek, in front of everybody. Or when you're in high school and she drops you off at right the front of the door, and all your friends are there. She says, I love you, pumpkin. And then for 4 years, you're pumpkin to everybody. This is what, mom could be doing here to James and John. Okay? Mama's getting into the picture here. The Zebedees, as a family, seem to be caught up in this concept of a worldly kingdom. James, John, we see Salome, his mother here. So they seem to this concept that Jesus is going to have an earthly kingdom, and we want ambition and privilege in that kingdom as well. It's what we're accustomed to, it's what we're used to. Now, James has to learn, and Jesus is going to try to teach him along the way, that the kingdom of God is not about rule and authority. On earth, recognition is important, but in the kingdom of God, it's not. You see, what she's talking about here with the right and the left, in the Jewish culture, when you sat at tables, you were recognized visibly by where you sat. And so the host, you know what you picture right now, the Last Supper, Da Vinci's Last Supper, with Jesus in the middle and everybody going to the sides. In the Jewish culture, the middle person, the host, sat in the middle. And then on the right was the second most important person, and then on the left was the third most important person, and on out from there. Right to left would be the seats of most importance. So this is what they're asking for. Put us in a position of prominence and privilege and authority. We want to be important. Jesus had warned the Pharisees about this. He had told them, do not sit in the seats of honor when you go. He had told this in front of the disciples, but they're not getting it. They're fighting for this position of privilege and authority. So Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? They answered, you will indeed drink. They answered, we can. They said, yes, we can. Then Jesus says, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. Yet Mama stands up there in front for the Zebedee brothers saying, this is what I want for my sons. And they go, yeah, we want this. We have ambition. We're privileged. We deserve this, right? We're in the inner circle. This is James, all right? James is the older brother in this duo here. I'm in the inner circle, Jesus. I'm your close friend. I'm cozy with you, and I think I deserve this. I'm something special because you've included me in things that you haven't included those other guys. And yet, ambition is not about who we are, and privilege is not about who we are. It's about who Jesus is. And this is a challenging thing when we look at the disciple of James and what we take from James. Because the question becomes is, are we allowing Jesus to define our agenda in our lives? Or are we expecting some sort of privilege because of our position in the family of God? Because we're God's children. We're believers, so we accept some privilege. Is our ambition only about establishing an earthly kingdom here, about building up what we have here, or is it about a spiritual kingdom? Do we allow the Spirit to transform us into spiritually focused disciples? We're going to be effective disciples if that transformation takes place. When we stop looking at ourselves, when we start looking at Jesus, and we allow His will for our life to move through us. You see, James is asking not to be transformed. He's not asking to be closer to God, to be closer to Jesus. He had his own ideas. He's asking, put me in the place of privilege in your kingdom. And his mother Salome had no idea what she's asking for at this point. Not really. She's asked, put me in this position, and Jesus says, you're going to drink the cup. And eventually James would be transformed. He would be transformed, and he would drink Christ's cup, as Jesus said. The last thing we see of James in the Bible, in the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 12, where it tells us that King Herod wants to persecute believers, and in doing that, kills James, John's brother, with a sword. He beheads James. And in this a final account of James' life, we see that he was zealously resolute. He was resolute, and he had been transformed by the Spirit. He's the first of the 12 apostles that will die for Jesus. He's the only one that we see in Scripture, in the Bible, killed. His passion that he had, you think back when he wanted to just burn everybody up because of what they had done to Jesus, his courageous passion and his ambition, privilege turned into service for Jesus and for Jesus' church, now combined with the power of the Spirit, must have been a powerful thing to his enemy Herod. Herod must have seen a great leader of the church because he went after him. He's persecuting him and he's going after him, but James doesn't waver. James stands there and he takes the persecution, and he's on the front line as the church continues to grow in the book of Acts. He stood up for God in the face of persecution and in the face of death. He stands up and he gives everything. He gives his all. He drinks the cup of death. And yet some of us are unwilling to even give our all in worship, to even give everything we've got when we sit here and worship. There was a black woman in the South, in the Southern church. Southern white church, conservative, quiet. The preacher said one morning, Jesus is the Son of God. And that woman stood up and said, amen, he is. Some people came over and said, well, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. She said, but I have religion, I have Jesus. And he said, well, you didn't get it here. And so she quiet, I'll be quiet. And so the preacher next talking, he says, Jesus died for our sins. And she says, yes, he did. And then the preacher says, on Sunday morning, and she says, he got up, he rose. Well, the same two guys walk over to her, and they start taking her out. And the whole time they're taking her out, she's saying, Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna in the highest. And they say, well, why are you doing that? Why are you saying that? And she says, well, Jesus rode in on one donkey, and I'm being ridden out on two. I'd have a joke about donkeys on Palm Sunday. But really, we don't give ourselves all in worship. And are we all in for Jesus? Are we willing to give all of ourselves to Him? Or are we just sitting on a bench? Are we just sitting on a bench? Because James, he starts out with misdirected passion and courage. He starts out with power and privilege and authority being his concerns. But in the end, he understands what it means to drink Christ's cup. In the end, he's transformed by the power of the Spirit. And he drinks the cup of death. He obeys Jesus, as Jesus obeys his Father to death. And instead of claiming privilege, James claims responsibility. His courageous passion and his ambition, when he gave those qualities over to God, and he allowed the Spirit to come in and to use those for his benefit, he realized what the big picture is. And the big picture is not who you are, but it's how you serve. And we don't serve Jesus to get more privilege. We serve Jesus because he owed us nothing, and yet he gave us everything. So today is Palm Sunday. Do we have something we need to pray for renewed passion, renewed courage, to giving our ambitions, our worldly ambitions over to God? Do we want to make a firm resolution to serve God better, to follow Him wherever He takes? Do we need to do those things? Do we need to decide today to give everything over to God? Today is Palm Sunday. It's the day that our King rode to His death, began the journey into His suffering, into His death, to serve us and to save us. Who is going to decide to follow behind Him?